Get out of the way. The command cracked through the boarding area at Gate B22 inside Charlotte Douglas Airport. A security officer snatched a passport from a black woman's hand and flipped it open with a look of open disgust. Fake. Obviously fake. The woman remained perfectly still. People like you always try the same trick. He lifted the passport where everyone nearby could see it. London, Geneva, Nairobi, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. Come on. People like you don't belong traveling through airports like this. Her voice stayed calm and low. Sir, that passport is valid. He laughed directly in her face. Valid? The only thing that's valid here is my right to keep suspicious people from boarding this aircraft. Then he turned, fed the passport into a document shredder behind the counter, and pressed the switch. The machine screamed. The blue cover folded inward. The pages disappeared into the blades. Travel stamps collected across years of work and movement vanished into thin strips of paper. Dozens of passengers stood frozen. The woman did not scream. She did not cry. She simply looked at him and smiled. What he did not understand was that he had just destroyed a federal document belonging to one of the most experienced aviation inspectors in the country. Earlier, before the terminal had filled with travelers, Naomi Whitaker stepped out of a rideshare beneath the dark Charlotte sky. The morning air was sharp, carrying the smell of jet fuel, cold pavement, and recycled airport air. She pulled a carry-on behind her, her heels striking the curb in a steady rhythm that matched her breathing. Naomi was the kind of woman people noticed without ever hearing her demand attention. She wore a navy blazer tailored perfectly to her frame, a white silk blouse and slim black trousers pressed with a clean crease. No oversized logos, no flashy jewelry. Only a thin gold watch on her left wrist and a worn leather briefcase that had probably crossed more airports than some pilots. Naomi Whitaker was a senior federal aviation inspector with the United States Department of Transportation. She had spent 15 years in the job. She had audited airlines across the country. She had grounded aircraft when safety demanded it. She had recommended the suspension of 3 airline operating certificates. When Naomi walked into an airline headquarters on official business, executives changed schedules, cancelled lunches, and made sure every file was ready. But this trip was different. She was not traveling for an inspection. She was not arriving with a team. She was simply a daughter flying home to see her mother in Washington. Her federal badge was not visible. Her credential letter was not in her hand. Both were tucked inside an interior pocket of her briefcase where they had remained untouched for days. She moved through this terminal with the ease of someone who had done it countless times. She bought a small black coffee from a kiosk and left a generous tip that was larger than the price of the drink. The barista smiled. Naomi smiled back. While walking towards security, she called her mother. "I'll be there before long, Mama." "You better be." "I made cobbler." Naomi laughed. A real laugh. Warm, loose, and completely different from the controlled professional voice most airline executives knew. A few strangers nearby smiled without knowing why. She cleared airport security without any issue. No alarms, no flags, no secondary screening. She found Gate B22, chose a seat near the window, crossed her legs, and opened a book with a worn spine. She had read it before. She did not mind. From the outside, Naomi Whitaker looked like any other traveler waiting for a morning flight. Quiet, calm, ordinary. That was one of the things about Naomi. She had never needed strangers to know who she was. But someone behind the podium at Gate B22 was about to find out. The man assigned to the boarding podium was Grant Mercer. Grant arrived late for his shift. He did not apologize. He did not hurry. He walked into the gate area carrying coffee in one hand while his Meridian Air lanyard swung from his neck like a medal. He had worked for the airline for 6 years. His title was Senior Gate Agent. He liked the word senior. He liked saying it when correcting newer employees. He liked the little kingdom the podium seemed to give him. At that counter, he could wave people through. He could hold them back. He could make them wait. And somewhere along the way, he had begun confusing that narrow authority with personal importance. The terminal smelled like floor cleaner, stale pastries, and coffee that had been sitting too long. Grant noticed none of it. He logged into the computer, glanced through the flight manifest, and yawned. A white businessman approached with a boarding pass that would not scan. Grant smiled. "No problem, sir. Happens all the time." He tapped a few keys. The issue was fixed almost immediately. A little later, a young black woman wearing casual athletic clothes approached with nearly the same problem. Her boarding pass would not scan. Grant's expression changed. Identification. She handed him her driver's license. He studied the front, turned it over, looked at it again, then looked at her. "Step aside. I'll get to you when I can." She moved aside. No argument, no question. She stepped away with the practiced movement of someone who had been told to step aside before. Nobody in line said anything, but someone noticed. Loretta Gaines had been sitting near the window for a while. She was a retired schoolteacher from Raleigh, 62 years old, traveling to Baltimore to visit her grandchildren. She had watched Grant handle one passenger after another. She did not need a spreadsheet to see the pattern. White passenger. Smile. Scan. Go. Black passenger. Pause. Inspect. Question. Wait. Loretta's fingers tightened around the armrest. Her jaw set. An overhead speaker announced a gate change somewhere farther down the terminal. Fluorescent lights buzzed above them. Loretta glanced toward Naomi, then back toward Grant. Under her breath, she whispered, "Lord, please don't let that man start something today." But something had already started. The boarding announcement came over the speakers. Meridian Air Flight 1482 to Washington was beginning the boarding process. Naomi closed her book, slipped it into her briefcase, stood, smoothed the front of her blazer, and joined the line. She waited patiently. Rolling suitcases knocked against the tile. A baby cried near another gate. The smell of warm cinnamon pretzels drifted from a cart down the corridor and mixed with the cold metallic taste of airport air conditioning. Naomi did not rush. She almost never rushed. She stood holding her boarding pass and passport, calm and composed, waiting the same way she had waited at countless gates around the world. The line moved. One traveler after another stepped forward. Grant scanned the passes with barely a glance. Beep. Go ahead. Beep. You're good. Beep. Have a nice flight. Then Naomi reached the podium. She placed her boarding pass and passport gently on the counter. She did not toss them. She did not shove them toward him. She set them down, the way a person sets down something that belongs to her. Grant looked at the passport, then at Naomi, then back at the passport. Something changed in his face, a tiny tightening in the jaw, a narrowing around the eyes. Most people would have missed it. Loretta did not. She was only a few feet behind Naomi in line, and she saw the shift immediately. Grant picked up Naomi's passport, not casually, not the way he had handled other documents. He pinched the cover between his thumb and index finger and held it slightly away from himself. Then he opened it slowly, page after page. His eyes moved across visa stamps and entry marks. London, Geneva, Nairobi, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. Each stamp represented work, travel, inspections, meetings, and years of movement across borders. Grant did not see a life. He saw something he wanted to doubt. This passport has a lot of stamps. It did not sound like admiration. It sounded like an accusation. Naomi's expression did not change. "I travel frequently for work." Work. Grant repeated the word as though he did not believe it. "What kind of job requires this much travel?" "Federal government." Naomi said it plainly. No drama. No attempt to impress him. Just the truth. Grant stared at her, then at the passport. Federal government. A smirk slowly appeared. Right. He opened to the photo page and held the passport beneath the fluorescent light. He tilted it left, then right. He squinted at the laminate as though examining a counterfeit diamond. The line behind Naomi grew longer. Passengers shifted impatiently. A man in a grey suit checked his watch. A woman holding a toddler sighed. Grant called a younger female gate agent over. She approached with coffee still in one hand. "Does this look right to you?" He held the passport out, like evidence. "The laminate seems wrong." The younger agent glanced at it. "It looks normal to me, Grant." "Normal?" He repeated her answer with contempt. "I've been doing this longer than you have. Go back to your station." The young woman lowered her eyes and walked away. Grant turned back toward Naomi. He tossed the passport onto the counter. It slid toward her and stopped. "I need another form of identification." Naomi opened her briefcase slowly and produced her driver's license. She placed it beside the passport. Grant picked up the license, looked at it, looked at the passport, then looked at Naomi. "These don't match." Naomi's voice remained level. "They do match. My name is Naomi Whitaker. Both documents say Naomi Whitaker. Don't tell me what matches." His voice rose, not quite a shout, something colder. The kind of controlled volume meant to remind everyone around him that he believed the counter belonged to him. "I decide what is legitimate at this gate." Passengers were staring openly now. No one was pretending to look at a phone. No one was glancing away quickly. A teenager farther back lifted a phone, hesitated, then lowered it. But Malcolm Avery did not hesitate. Malcolm was 32, a software developer from Atlanta making a connection. He stood several feet to the side of the podium. He had watched Grant handle the passport as though it were contaminated. He had seen the expression on Naomi's face. He had heard the questions. And without saying a word, he had started recording. His phone was held low, steady. The red recording indicator blinked silently. Grant did not notice. He was too focused on the performance. He picked up the passport again, opened to the photograph, held it beside Naomi's face, then turned his head from the picture to her, back to the picture, and back to her again. "I'm not satisfied that this is a legitimate travel document." Naomi lifted her chin slightly. "Excuse me?" Grant leaned forward. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "People like you don't travel to places like London and Geneva. Your kind belongs somewhere else, not on my aircraft." The gate area seemed to lose all warmth, not silence. Cold. The kind of silence that presses against the ears. A child reached for his mother's hand. She pulled him closer. Loretta covered her mouth. Then Grant turned toward the counter. He picked up Naomi's passport with 2 fingers, and before anyone understood what he was doing, he fed it into the document shredder behind the podium. The motor screamed. The blue passport cover bent. The pages caught. The blades pulled the entire document inside. Years of visas, stamps, and official travel history disappeared into narrow strips. It took only seconds. Naomi watched the shredded paper fall into the bin. Her jaw tightened. Her nostrils flared, but her hands did not shake. Her voice did not break. "You just destroyed a federal document, a United States passport." Grant brushed a strip of paper from the counter. "I just protected this flight from a fraudulent document. You can complain to customer service." Then he reached for his radio. "Security to gate B-22. I have a passenger with fraudulent documents causing a disturbance." Naomi did not move. She did not raise her voice. She did not step backward. She opened her briefcase, took out her phone, and dialed a number from memory. When someone answered, she spoke with the calm precision of a person who knew exactly what procedure came next. "This is Naomi Whitaker, Federal Credential number 8841. I need Camille Hart, contacted immediately." She ended the call, put the phone away, and waited. Loretta stepped out of line. She moved to Naomi's side. Her voice trembled. Her feet did not. "I saw everything, sweetheart. Every word. He had no right to do that." Naomi looked at her. For the first time since the confrontation began, something softened in her expression. Gratitude. Brief. Quiet. Then 2 airport police officers arrived. Their boots struck the tile. Radios crackled. Grant pointed at Naomi before either officer could ask a question. She tried to board using a forged passport. I handled it. One officer looked at Naomi. The other looked at the shredder bin. Blue and white strips of paper were piled inside. Naomi reached into her briefcase again. She produced her driver's license and a Department of Transportation business card. "My name is Naomi Whitaker. I'm a senior federal aviation inspector with the United States Department of Transportation." The officer took the card. "Read it." "Then read it again." His eyebrows rose. He looked at his partner. His partner looked at Grant. Grant's smirk disappeared. The officers separated them. One guided Grant several steps to one side. The other asked Naomi to remain on the opposite side of the podium, close enough to see each other, far enough to keep the situation controlled. The air smelled faintly of burned paper, plastic, coffee, and nervous sweat. The shredder bin sat in plain view like a container full of evidence. Sergeant Ellis Rowan spoke with Grant first. He opened a small notepad. "Tell me what happened." Grant answered immediately. Fast. Confident. "I identified a suspicious traveller. The passport didn't look right. The laminate was wrong, the stamps were inconsistent. I've worked here 6 years. I know a fake travel document when I see one." Sergeant Rowan wrote something down. "Did you follow Meridian Air's document verification procedure?" Grant blinked. "I used my training and experience." "That is not what I asked." "Did you contact the document verification support line before destroying the passport?" Grant paused. "I made a judgment call. So the answer is no." Grant's neck reddened. "I've worked this gate for 6 years. I've caught things security missed. I don't need a hotline to tell me what my eyes can see." Sergeant Rowan stopped writing. He looked up. "What exactly did your eyes see, Mr. Mercer?" Grant hesitated. "She didn't look right." "Didn't look right in what way?" Grant glanced toward Naomi. The passport had stamps from everywhere. London, Geneva, Nairobi. It didn't make sense for someone like her to travel like that. Someone like her. The question hung between them. Grant's jaw tightened. He understood exactly what he had implied. He did not want to repeat it while an officer was writing. "Forget it. I did my job." On the other side of the podium, Officer Renee Baxter was speaking with Naomi. Her tone was professional and careful. "Ma'am, please walk me through exactly what happened." Naomi did what she had done for 15 years in aviation oversight. She documented. Clear, precise, no wasted words. She described placing her passport on the counter. She repeated Grant's statements as accurately as she could. She described the younger employee who had looked at the passport and said it appeared normal. She described the demand for another identification document. She described the insult. She described the shredder. She identified witnesses. She noted the sequence. When she finished, she added one final point. He intentionally destroyed a valid United States passport issued by the Department of State. That may constitute a federal offense. Officer Baxter stopped writing. She looked toward Sergeant Rowan, then picked up her radio. "Dispatch, this is Baxter at Gate B-22. Send a supervisor and notify Federal Transportation Coordination. We may have intentional destruction of a federal travel document." Grant heard her. His head snapped around. For the first time, his posture changed. His shoulders tightened. His eyes moved from the officers to Naomi, then to the shredder bin. Still, he could not stay quiet. "You're really going to believe her over me? I'm the gate agent. I have authority here. She arrived with a fake passport and now she's pretending to be the victim." Officer Baxter did not respond. That seemed to make Grant angrier. This is what people like her do. They show some card, claim some title, and suddenly everyone acts like I'm the problem. Sergeant Rowan raised one hand. "Mr. Mercer, lower your voice." "I will not lower my voice. I did my job and now you're treating me like I'm the criminal." The entire gate area had stopped moving. Passengers watched. A woman near the window pressed a hand to her chest. A businessman slowly shook his head. The toddler from earlier buried his face against his mother's shoulder. And Malcolm Avery's phone was still recording. Steady, silent. The red dot blinking. Soon, the Meridian Air Station manager arrived. His name was Preston Vale. His tie was crooked. There was a coffee stain on his shirt. He had been pulled away from an operations meeting and had clearly come in a hurry. One glance at the scene drained the color from his face. 2 police officers, a shredder bin full of what had once been a passport. A black woman standing with the stillness of someone holding herself together through discipline. Grant pacing behind the podium. Preston looked at him. "Grant, what happened?" "I identified a suspicious passenger and destroyed a fraudulent passport." Standard procedure. Preston stared at the shredded paper, then at Naomi, then back at Grant. "Did you call the verification line?" Grant did not answer. "Grant, did you call before destroying a United States passport?" "I didn't need to. I could tell." "You could tell what?" Grant stepped closer. He lowered his voice, but not enough. "People like her, Preston. You know how it is. Documents that don't make sense. Somebody has to stop them." Preston physically flinched. He took a step back, then pulled out his phone and called corporate headquarters. While he made that call, something was already happening beyond the gate. Something Grant could not control. Malcolm ended his recording. The video was 4 minutes and 38 seconds long. It contained the questioning, the insults, the passport going into the shredder, the sound of the blades, the shocked faces, Grant's voice, Naomi's calm response. Malcolm uploaded it to social media with a simple caption asking Meridian Air to explain why one of its gate agents had shredded a black passenger's passport in front of an entire boarding area. He used a short tag, Shredder Gate. The clip spread almost immediately. Tens of thousands of views became hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands became more than 1 million. Screenshots moved across other platforms. Newsrooms began calling the airline. Civil rights organizations started asking questions. The phrase Shreddergate moved from local conversation to national attention. Grant knew none of that yet. He was still standing near the podium, convinced he had been right. Then Meridian Air Corporate called Preston directly. A senior executive had seen the video. The instruction was immediate. Remove Grant Mercer from the public gate area. Place him somewhere private. Do not allow him to speak with passengers, reporters, or anyone recording video. Preston walked over to Grant. "You need to come with me." "Why?" "Because there is a video, Grant." He paused, and the whole country is starting to watch it. Grant's face went blank. Not remorse, not fear, blankness. The expression of someone watching reality break through the story he had been telling himself. He was escorted to a small back office behind airline operations. The room had no windows. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Grant sat alone in a plastic chair. Meanwhile, Naomi's earlier call had reached Camille Hart. Camille was the regional director of the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. She was already in Charlotte for an unrelated federal meeting. The moment she received the briefing, she redirected her car toward the airport. Federal aviation security personnel at the airport were also notified. They arrived at Gate B-22 with credentials visible and expressions unreadable. The flight to Washington was delayed. The boarding podium stood empty. Passengers sat in rows whispering. Some watched Malcolm's video on their phones, even though they had just witnessed the same event with their own eyes. There was something surreal about seeing real life turn into a viral clip before the moment itself had even ended. Several passengers approached Officer Baxter voluntarily. They offered statements. Each described the confrontation in nearly the same way. Unprovoked, Loretta Gaines gave her statement last. She sat across from Officer Baxter with her hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, she sounded like exactly what she had been for 30 years. A teacher who knew how to separate fact from excuse. That man did not simply check her passport. He targeted her. I watched him greet white passengers warmly, then question black passengers differently. When that woman reached the counter, he treated her with suspicion before she had done anything. Loretta's eyes filled. Then he destroyed her passport right in front of her. That wasn't safety. That was cruelty. Officer Baxter closed the notepad. "Thank you, ma'am. Loretta stood, straightened her jacket, returned to her seat, and waited with everyone else. A dark sedan arrived at the terminal. Camille Hart stepped out before the driver could reach her door. She wore a dark grey suit, black heels, and a federal identification badge clipped to her lapel. She moved through the entrance with purpose. She did not stop for coffee. She did not study the departure board. She did not check her phone. Her assistant had already given her the essential facts. Federal credential number 8841. Naomi Whitaker, Senior Aviation Inspector. Valid passport destroyed by a gate agent at Gate B22. Video spreading rapidly. Camille had spent 22 years with the Department of Transportation. She had led major aviation consumer investigations. She had shut down operations when regulations were ignored. She had testified before Congress. She was known for entering rooms with a folder and a quiet voice, then leaving executives wondering how much trouble they were really in. That day, Camille was furious. But she did not look furious. She looked calm, and that was worse. Sergeant Rowan met her near the airline operations area. She showed her credentials. Where is the employee? Back office. End of the hall. Camille did not go to Naomi first. She went directly to Grant. She opened the door without knocking. Grant looked up. His eyes were red from exhaustion and from sitting alone replaying the morning. Then he saw the federal badge. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Camille remained standing. My name is Camille Hart. I am the Regional Director for the United States Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. Every word landed slowly. Grant gripped the sides of the plastic chair. The woman whose passport you destroyed is Senior Federal Aviation Inspector Naomi Whitaker. Grant's face changed. Camille continued. She has the authority to conduct federal airline audits. She can recommend aircraft groundings when safety regulations require it. She can recommend action against airline operating certificates. She can refer serious regulatory violations involving airline personnel for federal investigation. Camille took one step into the room. She reports directly through my regional office. Grant swallowed. I didn't know who she was. You did not ask. She never told me. She should not have needed to. Camille held his eyes. That was the entire point. A valid passport does not become more valid because the person carrying it has authority. Then Camille turned and left the room. She found Preston Vale in the hallway. He stood with his phone in one hand, looking as though he had forgotten how to breathe normally. Mr. Vale, he straightened. Effective immediately, the Department of Transportation is opening a formal investigation into passenger handling practices at this station. Preston's grip tightened around his phone. Ma'am, I assure you this was an isolated incident. No, it was not. Camille's voice never rose. Our office has received multiple discrimination complaints connected to Meridian Air operations in Charlotte over the last 2 years. Many involved passengers of color. Most were resolved internally. She paused. Resolved internally can mean many things. In this case, we intend to find out exactly what it meant. Preston said nothing. Camille continued, Your airline did not appear on our radar because of what happened today. Today simply accelerated the review. Preston swallowed. Can we at least rebook Miss Whitaker on the next available Meridian flight? Miss Whitaker will not be using Meridian Air today. Camille adjusted the badge on her lapel. Possibly not again. Airport staff arranged for Naomi to travel with another carrier. She was offered a first-class seat on the next available flight to Washington. She accepted without comment. She picked up the same leather briefcase she had carried into the terminal. Inside it was the federal badge she had never displayed. The credential letter Grant had never given her a reason to present. None of those documents should have mattered to whether her passport was treated as valid. Naomi thanked the officers. Then she looked toward Loretta. Loretta was still seated near Gate B22. Their eyes met. Loretta nodded. Naomi nodded back. Her heels clicked across the tile as she walked away. Same rhythm, same posture, same woman who had entered the airport earlier. Nothing about Naomi had changed. Everything around her had. In the back office, Grant sat alone. The door remained open. His phone buzzed on the table. He turned it over. A message from a co-worker. "You're everywhere." There was a link. Grant tapped it. The video opened. Millions of people had already watched. His face, his name badge, his voice, the passport entering the shredder, his words replaying again and again. He called his union representative. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Grant set the phone down and stared at the wall. An airport police officer entered the room. "Mr. Mercer, you are being detained here pending federal review. Do not leave." The officer stepped out. The fluorescent light continued buzzing. Grant sat in the silence, a silence created by his own decisions. It did not take long for Meridian Air to make its decision. A call came from corporate headquarters. The instruction was brief. Grant Mercer was finished. Preston Vale walked to the back office. The room smelled like old coffee and anxiety. Grant sat in the same plastic chair. His arms were crossed. His jaw was clenched. His phone lay face down on the table. Preston stayed standing. "Your employment with Meridian Air has been terminated effective immediately." Grant stared at him. "Terminated?" "Yes." "For what?" "For destroying a passenger's passport without following required verification procedures. For making discriminatory statements in front of witnesses and on video. For creating a national crisis for this airline." Grant shot to his feet. The chair scraped loudly across the floor. "This is insane." The passport was suspicious. She was suspicious. Everything about her was. Preston cut him off. "Was what, Grant?" "Silence." "Finish the sentence." Grant said nothing. Preston looked at him. "There are millions of people watching a video in which you already finished that sentence for them." Grant's mouth remained open. Millions. The number seemed to sit in the room between them. Preston extended his hand. "Your badge." Grant looked down at the Meridian Air lanyard around his neck. He had worn it for 6 years. He had adjusted it in mirrors. He had liked the way it made him feel important. Now he slowly pulled it over his head. For a moment, he held it, then dropped it onto the table. The badge made a small plastic click. 2 security employees appeared in the doorway. Grant walked between them, down the hallway, past operations, past the break room, past the gate corridors he had worked for years. A traveler looked up from her phone, then looked again. "That's him." The whisper moved quickly. Heads turned. Phones rose, not always to record, but to compare the face walking through the terminal with the face on their screens. Grant kept his eyes down. The automatic doors opened. Outside air rushed toward him. He walked out unemployed. And the consequences were only beginning. Meridian Air released a public statement. It announced that the employee involved had been terminated and that the airline did not tolerate discrimination. The statement said the company was cooperating with federal authorities. Federal prosecutors confirmed that the incident was being reviewed for possible charges connected to destruction of federal property and willful deprivation of civil rights. Grant's attorney later released a statement saying that Grant regretted any misunderstanding and believed he had been acting in the interest of flight safety. The word misunderstanding spread almost as quickly as the original video. Many people rejected it because what happened on the recording did not look like a misunderstanding. It looked deliberate. Then, former passengers began coming forward. 3 people of color described earlier encounters with Grant at the same gate. One said she had been questioned for an extended period over a valid boarding pass. Another said she had been forced to unpack her carry-on in front of the gate area. A third said he had been denied boarding without a clear explanation. All 3 had filed complaints. Every complaint carried nearly the same internal notation. Resolved. No action needed. 3 short words. 3 passengers. 3 complaints that had disappeared into a system without meaningful review. They would not stay buried now. A formal investigation followed. Federal auditors arrived at Charlotte Douglas with rolling briefcases, legal authority, and no interest in theatrics. No cameras, no dramatic announcements, Just records requests, interviews, policy reviews, personnel files, complaint histories, and the slow pressure of people who knew how to follow documentation. They began with Grant Mercer's employment file, 6 years of work. Routine reviews, meets expectations. No significant issues. Then they pulled formal complaints. 9 complaints over 4 years. Every complainant was a passenger of color. One woman said Grant accused her of stealing her own suitcase. Another said he called security because he believed her child's boarding pass looked altered. A man reported that Grant told him to go back to the country he came from. 9 people had taken the time to report what happened. 9 complaints. And all 9 had been closed with the same general result. Resolved. No action needed. The auditors followed the approval chain. Each complaint had been closed by Grant's shift supervisor, Victor Hale. Victor had approved the closures without interviewing most of the complainants, without reviewing all available video, without meaningful follow-up. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Victor was later terminated, but the investigation did not stop there. Auditors expanded the review beyond Grant. They pulled complaint data for the entire Meridian Air Station. The pattern became even larger. 31 discrimination complaints had been recorded over 2 years. 26 involved passengers of color. 22 had been closed without disciplinary action. No meaningful oversight. No consistent bias training. No independent review. The complaint process appeared better designed to close cases than to understand them. The Department of Transportation's final report imposed a civil penalty of $2,800,000. It also required corrective action, mandatory anti-discrimination training for customer-facing employees across the airline, body-worn cameras or comparable recording systems at gate podiums, quarterly compliance reports to federal regulators for 3 years, and an independent ombudsman responsible for reviewing future discrimination complaints. Meridian Air's chief executive appeared in a public video statement. We failed. We failed our passengers. We failed our values. The public response was skeptical. The fine was significant, but it was only one part of what followed. The larger reckoning moved into federal court. Grant Mercer was indicted by a grand jury. He faced 2 major counts: destruction of a federal document and willful deprivation of civil rights. When the trial began, the courtroom gallery was full. Judge Marissa Kendall presided. Several national news organizations followed the proceedings. Naomi Whitaker took the witness stand. She wore a navy suit, no dramatic accessories. The same thin gold watch rested on her wrist. Her hands were folded. Her posture was calm. The prosecutor walked her through the airport encounter. The boarding line, the passport, the questions, the insults, the shredder. Naomi described every step with the same precision she had used throughout her federal career. Then the prosecutor asked what she felt when she heard the shredder turn on. Naomi paused. I felt erased. 2 words. The courtroom fell silent. Loretta Gaines testified next. Her reading glasses rested above her eyes. Her purse sat on her lap. Her voice trembled slightly. Her words did not. I watched that man smile at white passengers. Then I watched him treat that woman as though she had done something wrong before she had done anything at all. Loretta looked toward the jury. He did not simply inspect her passport. He destroyed it. There is a difference between doing your job and choosing to harm someone. He chose harm. Then Malcolm Avery's recording played on the courtroom screen. 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Unedited. No commentary. No dramatic music. Just the raw scene. The suspicious tone. The insult. The passport being shredded. The sound of the machine. The reaction of everyone nearby. Several jurors looked away when the passport entered the blades. One covered her mouth. Former passengers testified too. Different incidents. The same pattern. Suspicion without cause. Hostility before evidence. Complaints that produced no meaningful consequence. Grant chose to testify in his own defense. His attorney had advised against it. Grant insisted. He still believed that if he could explain himself, people would understand. The prosecutor asked the first important question. Mr. Mercer, did you contact the document verification support line before destroying the passport? No. Did you consult your station manager first? No. What specific physical feature of the passport made you conclude it was fraudulent? Grant hesitated. The stamps. The travel. It didn't make sense for someone like... He stopped. Someone like what? Silence. Grant looked down. No further questions. The jury deliberated, then returned with its verdict. On the count involving destruction of a federal document, guilty. On the count involving willful deprivation of civil rights, guilty. Grant lowered his head. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder. Grant did not respond. He stared at the table like it might contain an answer to a question he had never seriously asked himself. At sentencing, Judge Kendall spoke directly to him. A passport is not merely paper. It is an official declaration of identity and citizenship. It represents a nation's recognition that the person named inside belongs, can move, can return, and has rights that do not depend on whether a stranger personally approves of them. She paused. When you destroyed that passport, you did more than damage a document. You abused your position to deny another person dignity and equal treatment because of assumptions tied to the color of her skin. The court imposed a sentence of 30 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Grant was permanently barred from employment in federally regulated transportation roles. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Civil rights advocates spoke to reporters. Naomi Whitaker was not there. She was back at work. Her phone received the verdict. She read it, set the phone down, and returned to an aviation audit report. Meridian Air later settled Naomi's civil lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. The airline also established a $5 million fund intended to support diversity and inclusion work in the aviation industry. The Shredder-gate phrase surged online one more time. One sentence appeared again and again beneath posts discussing the case. She did not need you to know who she was. Her passport was valid either way. Eventually, the national news cycle moved on. New stories replaced old ones. The phrase stopped trending. The video no longer appeared at the top of everyone's feed. That is what public attention does. It can burn intensely, then move somewhere else. But the people who lived through Gate B22 did not forget. Naomi Whitaker was later promoted to Deputy Director within the Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. Her responsibilities expanded. Her authority grew. She gave only one major interview about what happened. The reporter asked what she wanted people to remember most. Naomi thought carefully before answering. I did not need anyone at that gate to know who I was for my passport to be valid. That is the point. A document does not become real when someone discovers the person holding it has power. It was real from the beginning. The question is why it took a federal credential before some people were willing to believe that. The reporter asked whether she had been angry. Naomi shook her head. I was not angry. I was tired. There is a difference. Anger can burn out. Being tired of the same pattern lasts longer. She declined other interviews, then returned to work. She kept traveling, kept auditing, kept doing the job she had done for years, quietly, thoroughly, without needing strangers to know her title. That was the thing about Naomi. Gate B22 did not change who she was. It changed what the people around her were finally willing to see. Grant Mercer eventually reported to a federal minimum security facility in North Carolina. There were no television cameras waiting, no reporters, no trending tag, just a man entering a controlled building and facing the consequence of choices he once believed he would never have to explain. Grant had already deleted his social media accounts, not because a court ordered him to. He deleted them himself. He could not bear the endless comments. The memes, the strangers who found his pages only to remind him of the video. Former co-workers did not visit. They did not call. At Meridian Air, his name became a cautionary reference in training rooms and break areas. Remember the employee who shredded the passport? That became the story attached to him. Not 6 years of employment. Not routine performance reviews. One morning, one shredder, one woman he had decided to judge before he had any reason to. Loretta Gaines returned home to Raleigh. She hugged her grandchildren, made dinner, then sat alone in her kitchen and cried. She was not completely sure why. Maybe it was relief, maybe exhaustion, maybe the weight of recognizing something she had seen in different forms throughout her life. Later, Loretta was invited to testify before a congressional subcommittee examining discrimination in air travel. She accepted. She wore her best church dress. She spoke without notes. I am 62 years old. I have been flying since I was 19, and I have never seen a white passenger's passport fed into a shredder at a gate. Not once. So please do not tell people that race had nothing to do with what happened. I have eyes, I have memory, and I have a voice. I intend to use it until things improve. People in the room stood and applauded. Loretta had not expected that. She simply nodded, picked up her purse, and walked out. Malcolm Avery returned to Atlanta and went back to his software job, but the recording followed him. Reporters called. Podcasts invited him. Organizations asked him to speak. He declined most requests. Instead, he created a small social media project focused on documenting civil rights incidents in public spaces. The account grew quickly. Within several months, it had more than 200,000 followers. Malcolm never claimed that recording alone solved injustice, but he had learned something simple. Sometimes evidence gives the truth a chance to survive when people with authority would rather control the story. Meridian Air completed its first year under mandated reforms. Internal reports showed a significant reduction in discrimination complaints at Charlotte Douglas. Recording systems were installed at gates. Training became regular. The independent ombudsman reviewed complaints personally. Was everything suddenly perfect? No. Real systems rarely change that cleanly. But the process was different. And sometimes different is where justice begins. That is where this story leaves us with something worth thinking about. Imagine you were standing in that line. You watched one person receive a smile and another receive suspicion. You heard a gate agent questioning someone differently because of how she looked. Then you watched a valid passport disappear into a shredder. What would you do? Would you speak? Would you record? Would you step beside the person being targeted? Or would you look away because your flight was boarding and you did not want trouble? There is no value in pretending courage is always easy. Often it is inconvenient. Sometimes it is uncomfortable. Sometimes your voice shakes. Loretta's did. Sometimes your hands stay quiet while your phone records. Malcolm's did. Sometimes courage looks like refusing to shout because you know the truth is already on your side. Naomi did that. And sometimes responsibility means examining not only the person who caused the harm, but the system that allowed earlier warnings to disappear. That is what the investigation finally did. The deepest lesson in this story is not that Naomi turned out to be powerful. Her federal position made the consequences larger, but it should never have been the reason she was treated with dignity. That passport was valid before Grant knew her title. Her citizenship was real before he saw a federal business card. Her right to travel did not increase because she had authority. Her humanity did not need a credential. That is the part worth remembering. We often learn who we are by how we treat people when we believe they have no power over us. Kindness shown only to important people is not really kindness. Respect given only after a title is revealed is not really respect. Fairness that depends on status is not fairness. And authority, even a small amount of authority behind an airport podium, carries responsibility. Grant was given the power to help manage boarding. He turned that responsibility into permission to judge. That choice had consequences, but this story is also about the people around him. The younger employee who saw the passport and said it looked fine. The passengers who watched. Loretta, who stepped out of a line. Malcolm, who pressed record. The officers who began asking questions. The investigators who looked beyond one incident and found a pattern. Every person had a choice. Some choices came too late. Some were imperfect. But together, they changed what happened next. There is something important in that. We do not always control the first wrong thing that happens in front of us. But we often have some control over whether it goes unanswered. A calm witness can matter. A truthful statement can matter. A recording can matter. A supervisor willing to ask one more question can matter. A complaint taken seriously can matter. A policy rewritten after failure can matter. And sometimes one person refusing to be humiliated into silence can force an entire institution to look at itself honestly. Forgiveness does not mean pretending harm never happened. Accountability does not require cruelty. Consequences do not have to become revenge. Grant had to answer for what he did. Meridian Air had to answer for complaints it failed to examine properly. Supervisors had to answer for closing cases without meaningful review. Those consequences were necessary because responsibility matters. But the goal of justice should always be more than punishment. The better goal is prevention, better training, better procedures, better oversight. A system in which the next passenger does not have to be a federal inspector to be believed. A workplace where a complaint cannot quietly disappear because dealing with it is inconvenient. A gate where a person's skin color does not change the level of suspicion placed on the same travel document. That is what meaningful change looks like. Not perfection, progress. Naomi's strength was not that she possessed more power than Grant realized. Her strength was that she did not need to prove her worth by humiliating him back. She stayed composed. She documented what happened. She used the proper channels. She allowed evidence to speak. And when the world later asked her what mattered most, she did not say, "You should have known who I was." She said something much more important. You should not have needed to know. That is a lesson that reaches far beyond airports. Never decide what someone deserves based on the surface. A person's skin color is not a resume. Their clothing is not a biography. Their accent is not evidence of intelligence or honesty. Their job title does not determine whether they deserve basic respect. And their lack of visible power does not give anyone permission to treat them as less human. Every stranger is carrying a life you cannot see, a family, a history, work, losses, dreams, responsibilities, maybe authority, maybe none at all. It should not matter. Dignity is not a reward for being impressive. It is something we owe one another before we know anything else. So the next time you witness someone being treated unfairly, remember Gate B22. You do not have to become the loudest person in the room. You do not have to create a confrontation. Sometimes you can simply say, "I saw what happened." Sometimes you can stand beside someone who has been isolated. Sometimes you can preserve evidence. Sometimes you can ask, why are we treating this person differently? And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to look away. If this story made you reflect on courage, fairness, dignity, or the choices ordinary witnesses make, share your thoughts. What would you have done in that boarding line? Would you have spoken? Would you have recorded? Would you have stepped forward? And what do you hope you would do the next time you see someone being judged before the facts are known? Because change does not begin only with powerful officials, courtroom verdicts, or federal investigations. Sometimes it begins with one person quietly deciding that what is happening in front of them is not acceptable. One witness, one voice, one honest record of the truth. Skin color is nobody's resume. No one gets to decide who belongs in the world based on how they look. Respect people before you know their title. Believe evidence before assumptions. Use authority with humility. And when you have the chance to make someone feel smaller, choose instead to act with fairness. That is how dignity survives. That is how trust is rebuilt. And that is how one painful moment can become the reason the next person is treated better.